Welcome to this roundtable on e-commerce. I'm Knut. I'm developer relations at Sanity IO. We are like a platform for social content, as we say, and we are used for e-commerce a bunch. And today I have Joseph and Kevin with me, and those are two developers who have done a lot of stuff with Sanity and Shopify and e-commerce and that whole thing. And I don't know almost anything about how to do e-commerce stuff. So I'm very excited to learn a lot for this hour or so that we are going to be on this Zoom talking about it. So perhaps, Joseph, you can start off by telling a bit about yourself.
Sure. I run a small development agency called Good Idea Studio. And I work with artists, music labels, kind of a lot of people in like the creative world, or like creative media world. And as a result, I often work with, I'm also often presented with designs that have like a lot of really unique visual aspects to them. So the e-commerce websites I tend to build are they're not as straightforward as templates usually can offer. So e-commerce or not, Sanity has been really great as a CMS for a lot of my projects, just because it's really customizable. And I'm working on an open source package to kind of sync product and collection data from Shopify to Sanity to more easily build custom storefronts without using all of the kind of like Shopify liquid stuff.
And this is the same Shopify GitHub repository. I remember when I think we found that by accident or something. We was like, what is this? Who did this? Awesome. Yeah. Cool. I can't wait to dive a bit more into that. Kevin, you're in New York, right?
Yeah. I feel like some of you may already know me, but I ran an agency here for just a little over 2 years. I come from a very heavily agency background. I've worked at Red Antler, Sweden Unlimited, Barrel. They're all super e-commerce heavy in their offerings, like very much live inside of a startup bubble here in New York and working constantly on DTC stuff night and day. And I also have need of overly custom experiences, and to the point of which I've built my own CMSs on occasion for clients to do a lot of the things that Sanity is now making a lot easier for me. I think I've touched most CMSs that are out there in the game at this point, and I've very much been favoring Sanity of late, and all the new stuff that you guys are adding to it is just continuing to make my life infinitely easier, and also much easier to sell your services, because things like live preview and Pane that you just added has already pleased one of my existing clients endlessly. So thank you for that new feature. It's awesome.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Have you gotten to try out the new split pane stuff yet, Joseph?
I haven't yet. I was just reading through the blog post though, and I'm excited I'm working on another project where I'll be setting that up. So
cool. It was released kind of like last week or something. So yeah, not everyone has been able to like jump right into it yet, but that's awesome. Cool. So I kind of sent you some questions beforehand, and one of the questions was like, what is it with the Shopify, Sanity, whatever combo that like works for you? I guess Joseph could begin.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've been working with Shopify maybe for 5 or 6 years now. And it's always kind of like when a client comes to me, they don't say that they want to build an e-commerce website. Like they already have Shopify in mind. It's kind of become the standard in many ways until you get into like large enterprise level e-commerce. And as a developer, it was always really frustrating to work with it, because as a CMS, it's really limited. You're kind of stuck with the kind of collections product URL structure, as well as the content in those pages. So I have a client that they wanted to use custom video banners at the top of the collections, but there's no way to do that in Shopify's like content editor. You can use kind of these plugins that edit these kind of like hidden meta fields, but then the plugins break. And so that was always a headache. And then also kind of just working with Shopify's kind of liquid themes. That whole like deployment flow was really kind of cumbersome and not what I was used to as mostly a React developer. So then they released their storefront API, which is a GraphQL API that essentially lets you create custom storefronts and kind of manage the cart and kind of just get people to the checkout screen. So that I was working with that, and then kind of on a separate project working with Sanity, and just started thinking like, wow, it would be really great if I could find a way to have the kind of content flexibility of Sanity and still use Shopify for all the e-commerce side of things. Because aside from its kind of shortcomings as a CMS, it is a very powerful business tool. And I couldn't like customers or my clients weren't really interested in any other platforms that might be more flexible. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm keep hearing about Shopify. That's like the e-commerce stuff is cool and great, but when it comes to like the CMS part, it's not so great. Is like that your experience too, Kevin?
Yeah, that's definitely like what has caused me to go a lot of these like more custom routes. I think a lot of the people that I work with are used to like more elevated experiences, but they've also had elevated experiences that are less than adequate. So being on super custom platforms where developers made a lot of like shortcuts, the CMS isn't very good, there's no like revision control, versus knowing that a Shopify site is limited to just like sections and those custom meta field editors is also like a large limiting factor, but it also means a lot less things can break. So it's like a two-sided battle of you can build something in Shopify that hopefully scales with the business and like stays up and running like within that like framework, versus navigating into these custom storefront API experiences that will in the long run, it does cost more money to build it and you do have to like maintain it at a like higher level, but it also elevates every other facet of the business. And one of the like big selling points for me and Sanity for a like Shopify experience was building these modular pages for marketing purposes. So a lot of times you have a client that wants to run a campaign to advertise like a Black Friday deal, and they hire a developer to build this custom page in the Shopify editor with the customizer GUI or not, because what's the point of customizing this page one time? So they just like hard code the entire experience, and it takes a developer a couple of hours, versus I use Sanity and the client can create any number of marketing pages with some like 40 to 50 modules that I've built into the system. So they can make hundreds of marketing pages and get like really granular with their email targeting, and like that extra cost to build it like headless storefronty is like leaps and bounds advantages in the long run for just like those marketing campaigns. So I steer almost all my clients away from just like a traditional e-com experience, because it's not something that can scale for very long. Because you'll need to hire a developer for the Shopify experience too, because you can't build those pages by yourself. There's just like not a CMS in their system that does that at all. So.
And how has the feedback been like for this marketing page builders that you have built?
I feel like there's definitely moments where my clients, it's kind of like when your friends have kids and they like show you pictures of their kids, like they're definitely showing other people like, oh, like you're just on a traditional Shopify experience. Like this is what our website is on. And I'm like, that's hilarious and awesome. But it helps validate that it was a good idea. The execution is like high enough fidelity. Like they're so pleased. And when I'm even pitching new business and they ask for references, people like the Prima team will tell them how amazing the CMS experience is. Like they are like very much like advocates of the platform, and it's because it's made their job so much easier than it could have been without it.
I think this is interesting because I would imagine that most people wanted like one platform or one editor to rule them all or something like that. Because here you are providing a kind of like a two system thing, because you have to do something in Shopify and you have to do something in Sanity. How does that work?
I actually have, so I have a third system, of course. I put some of my documentation into like shared Notion docs, and I have basically instructions for some of the more complicated things that we're doing. So they have some like interesting like bundle splitting that we do, which is something that Shopify doesn't do very well or at all. So it's really documentation for something that wouldn't work in a Shopify system anyway. And I just built a way for it to work and organized it into a document so that they can reference it in the future. But for the most part, all they're really doing in Shopify is setting a title, setting a price, and putting an image in Shopify so that when the Shopify emails go out, there's an image associated to it. Everything else I put into Sanity, and they're in that every day. They're in Shopify when they add a new product, which is like once a month, if that.
Yes. So now you're touching on something that I want to talk a bit with you about, Joseph, because this entails that you actually need to get some data from Shopify into Sanity. And that seems like the big hairy problem. So I'm curious how you went about solving that.
So what I've done is I built a little toolkit that in the same Shopify repo that handles syncing the documents, and then there's a option in Shopify to add webhooks. So after a product or collection has been updated, it'll ping whatever URL you ask, and I'll be setting those up. So I'm currently using Netlify to host these websites, and Netlify has the option to have essentially kind of serverless Lambdas deployed along with the site. So I just set up a Lambda that listens for those webhooks, and when it happens, it just uses the Sanity API to update those documents. But yeah, and similar to how Kevin's been setting things up, I have my clients do most of the kind of like website editing in Sanity. And even though it's not ideal to have two different systems, the way I've been kind of describing it to them is to use Shopify for managing the product catalog and setting prices and options and those kind of things, and then Sanity for the website. And so descriptions, additional images, things like that.
So it seems to me that the Shopify data is mostly augmented in Sanity. Because if you would overwrite that, that would probably create some trouble, I guess.
Yeah, and the way I've been separating it is every product becomes a Sanity document, and then within that Sanity document, there's a field called source data that is all the original kind of Shopify stuff. And so what's nice about this is when you're querying Sanity, you can get all the custom stuff that you've added, but then you can also look into the source data to see if you need like product handles or like additional information about the options. It's all kind of tucked away in there.
And it's kind of perhaps read only or something.
Yeah, I did think a little bit about like finding a way to do like a two-way sync, but I immediately was just like, this is, I don't know, it's not worth it, all the factors that could come up there. So
yeah, it's not a trivial thing, I would imagine. Yeah. Did you try that, Kevin? It seems like you.
Yeah, I've done that before, because obviously I thought there was a utility or a need for it. This was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. I built a Meteor CMS that listened to Shopify and then resaved all the data back. And the reasoning for that was I didn't build a view layer on top of Shopify. I pushed all of the meta fields into back into the Shopify content HTML block, which allowed for basically SSR inside of a Shopify experience. I created the components remotely and then saved them back down into Shopify. I was also doing a sync to Algolia before Shopify and Algolia had a partnership. There was a lot of technical debt in that experience, but it was before all of these additional tooling came to be. So adding things like Algolia was not something that you could do to a Shopify experience without writing your own connector, essentially. But since then, even in my couple of Sanity Shopify experiences, I'm not syncing the data back. And I also have product variant, the handle, all of that stuff is read only, so that they can't. I also don't let the client create products at the product level in Sanity, because they did that in the past and it broke things. So I also turned that off. So yeah, Shopify owns the root of the product data, essentially.
Yeah, and so you kind of mentioned one caveat or something that people should watch out for. Is there only other things that people should think about before venturing into this combo?
Go ahead, Kevin.
First?
Sure.
You can go first.
The biggest thing that has kind of been a hurdle for my clients is, and this isn't necessarily a Sanity Shopify combo, but since we're building the website using the storefront API and not the kind of liquid template structure, the built-in e-commerce analytics in Shopify don't work. Similarly, a lot of the apps that one might install that in Shopify that have kind of impact on the front end, those also won't work. So there are some, it does kind of you have to work around some of these kind of more one-click solutions, but it's just as easy to, well, not just as easy, but it's not a huge leap to implement the same kind of analytics just using the Google Merchant platform and things like that. So, so there are some limitations there. And of course, as Kevin mentioned too, it's you need a developer to be kind of wiring all this together, and it's definitely more of a commitment. But in terms of customizability, it's usually worth the payoff for my clients. So,
Anything
I
to
think
add?
it's like, I think the plugin thing is probably the biggest factor. And a lot of that is really just ensuring the client is like knowledgeable and educated into what we're getting them into. I've said it, I've definitely said it like a number of times to a number of clients, and there's still that off occasion, like some marketing person will send me some instructions. It's like, please add our pixel with this like theme.liquid file. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Like I've told you guys like 100 times, this is a custom, please send me the custom instructions. And if there's not custom instructions, then send me a connection directly to like one of the engineers on their team, because it's not going to work the way that you think it is for some of these factors. And I think that's really the only place that I've experienced like a bit of like pain touch points, is like integrating these additional services is sometimes more complicated. Sometimes it's also easier. Yotpo, for example, the reviews application does have an API. So instead of using the widget that you see on a lot of websites, that's really hard to customize and modify, I use the API to make like really clean markup with minimal CSS. I get to load the reviews directly into the build. So all of my review data is also like statically rendered for SEO purposes. So there's occasionally like large upsides to some of these more custom integrations, and then more difficult implications of like the pixel stuff tracking through all the way, has definitely caused headaches across many of my headless experiences. And it's because the marketing teams aren't educated to not Shopify. So that's been a like harder thing to deal with.
Yeah, that's like, I suspect that many people are wondering about how to like pitch this stuff. Like it seems like most people are used to like having a WordPress site or what have you. And when you come dragging with like, yeah, we are going to set up this like headless Sanity thing and Shopify, and we have some lambdas that will connect your project. How do you have that conversation? Like, what do you tell them?
When I was pitching this setup to a current client that we should be launching in early January, I really just kind of went into the details about. I showed some mock-ups from a previous project and pointed out how things like this weren't achievable through Shopify alone. And so I think once I kind of like explained it from their point of view in terms of like editing content and kind of like what their day-to-day experience would be like, it made more sense to them and they went for it. So
it boils down to, yeah, we can solve your problem with this like stack. So yeah, that's probably easy to agree with.
Yeah, I think it's a very similar experience for me. Is it's all just around educating them, and I'm also like, I'm not going to force them into this headless experience if at the end of the day they're not going to get all the utility out of it. I just built a traditional Shopify site for a client that I knew it would be a very long uphill battle to get them to go a headless experience for their business needs. Like they're just very traditional ecom. They didn't have need of a really custom editorial experience or really custom like a glossary or ingredients index or any number of like these custom things that you get additionally for going headless. So I think it's just building the thing that the client actually needs. And for the ones that are willing to push it a lot further, like it's obviously more fun and more beneficial for them in the long run, I think, from a business standpoint. But you also have to just like yeah, you have to listen to the client, and hopefully they make the right decision with you. Because otherwise they'll be upset.
Yeah, upset clients. Nobody wants that. So yeah, it's yeah, we have the same feeling as well. So I think that it should be like the right project. We shouldn't like force the newest and best tech on everybody. It's not perhaps the right thing in all projects. So yeah, it seems sensible. If we could like, it's perhaps a bit cliche, but it's always interesting to think a bit ahead. Where do you think this is going? Like, what would the conversation be next year in terms of like what you could do with this combo or everything else that is happening in the like front end world? It's the end of the year. We can allow ourselves some crystal ball tech future.
Yeah. On my side, I'm in the middle of 2 fairly large builds with this setup. So I'm still kind of, I guess my kind of focus has been my timeline is the next month or 2. And I'm sure there will be issues that come up, but also new ideas. And I'm not really sure what would be next overall, but we'll kind of, my clients are always asking me to kind of like, how can we implement this new weird idea? And so far, like my experience with Sanity is that most of that stuff is pretty achievable. So I guess I'm looking forward to whatever might come up.
I think things being stable and
stability
is totally okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we need some AI stuff and VR. What about you, Kevin? Do you have some ideas?
I think it's like you can look at previous tech and how it's like moved and evolved, and I think about the storefront and graph API coming out of Shopify, tools like headless CMSs that have come out like Sanity, and how we're just moving away from traditional like Shopify theme installs and moving further away from custom Shopify theme builds, and taking tools like your Sanity Create and refactoring that to be Sanity Create Shopify experience. So instead of using something like Slate to bootstrap your Shopify build, you would do something like a Sanity Slate or other CMS Slate. And that just allows us to build in a more modern framework instead of fighting or relying on the Shopify team to build out additional developer tools. Let's just let them focus on e-com, focus on point of sale, focus on fulfillment, all of that stuff. And like we retake the like front end dev cycle back, and we do it using the tools that we're accustomed to, instead of waiting for them to like update a theme so that it's got modern sections inside of it. Like I don't even need modern sections. I'll just use a headless CMS and I'll roll my own. So I see that like shift of developers retaking Shopify development into Next, Gatsby, Vue, whatever. And I think we'll see a lot more of those experiences moving forward for sure.
Yeah, perhaps you could move into actually taking a close look at some of the experiences. I know that you launched a site last week, was it? Like time is a flat circle for me now. It's so busy. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, same. I feel like I launched like 4 websites in November, so my life is like literally a complete blur. One of them was a Sanity experience, and it's like it's an interesting one because it's sort of the opposite of some of the things that I was saying earlier, where they didn't have need of all this like custom super modular stuff. They just wanted a really simple scaled back experience. So I just wanted to get like Shopify out of the way, because the add to cart experience was such a like minimal aspect. I want to like transition Shopify into being like a small widget that's part of your shopping experience. But do you want me to show something?
Yeah, sure.
I can show it. Share. Oh, there's a bunch of errors on my screen. That's really helpful.
No.
They're like large exclamation points, so I'm not sure what it's going to share. So
I can share something really quick while you're
Yeah, sure.
debugging. Does that work? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
This is a website I built for a good friend of mine. Let's see.
No, perhaps.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, cool. So I'm on the website now.
So this was kind of my my proof of concept build of kind of using Shopify and Sanity. The way it's actually implemented is different from from the package I'm currently working on. But this, it uses the storefront API and pulls from Sanity at the same time. And the overall structure isn't remarkably different from kind of standard e-commerce, but this one, for instance, allowed us to actually, if you scroll to the top of this page, these banner images are an example of something that's customized through Sanity, which we couldn't do in a straightforward way through Shopify. So.
And you have like variants and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And like, I guess like FAQs, this comes from Sanity, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm almost like willing to like let you restart Zoom because it would be cool to like actually see the studios and stuff.
On my side?
Yeah, and Kevin's too, actually.
Let's see.
So I can just like
could we do a
cut.
pause?
I can do like a post edit.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Let me figure this out.
All right. I think all I have to do is like close and stop. So.
Yeah.
See if we can get anywhere.
Yay.
Oh, that looks
One
good.
thing works.
So we are now confirmed that 3 developers almost are able to share screens.
Almost able to share screens. Technology is incredible, you know?
Yeah, 2019. Here we are.
You've got the preview up. That looks great.
Yeah, it's super awesome and helpful.
Okay, so we're back from a bit of technical, problems, I guess. Sharing screens in Zoom isn't straightforward with the newest and greatest Mac OS, but Kevin managed to finally share his screen. So here we are in the studio. This is Prima, right?
Yeah, so I've showed this in the past, but I'm still actively developing it. So I've had the luxury of adding some of the new features, one of which is this Pane preview, which is substantially elevated, I think, the editing experience from the client's perspective and from my perspective. Super big fan. I haven't added it everywhere because there's a lot of stuff going on this website, but I have added it to the products with some like custom. I'm losing a bunch of stuff. There we go. What I have found, because of my particular situation in that this web preview is actually a Gatsby like mini application that's just routed at previews, and I pass to it a ID in order to like render this page. So I'm essentially just iframing that experience here, which also means I have to like hard refresh the iframe when changes are made, but I don't really know how else to do that. I don't expect there to be like hot module reloading inside of this web preview. I'm willing to, you know, make some sacrifices there. But I think I wanted to show, I guess, some of the default variant stuff, but I've moved a bunch of things, so I'm not as, so yeah, this is like some of those like read-only fields that I think we were both talking about that I've like hidden as far away as possible because no one really needs to see that information. Yeah, and then like the product ID, the title is also, the reasoning behind some of these other read-only fields is ensuring that Shopify consistency between emails, cart, navigating the products. The slug should also be read-only because if you're using any of the Shopify sales channel stuff, it builds those URLs with like products / that slug. Something that I learned the hard way with another client, we gave them really custom routing that broke Shopify conventions because they want everything to be /products / slug. So that's like one other thing to keep in mind is some of those Shopify things like do need to stay in place in order for success. But I actually also, I wanted to show just this new site that's like it's much further scaled back from like the Prima experience in that there's only a couple of pages. The customization is a lot lighter. There's not over 100 modules on this website. There's this like slideshow, this brand moment. This is a related product module. This is a like content slideshow, and then another similar blogging experience, which was something that was elevated because of Sanity.
I think you have to acknowledge that design isn't your typical e-commerce experience, I would say.
No, this is definitely like this is different than traditional e-com. It's very much more about like elevating like a brand identity and less like in your face CTAs, like buy now, less marketing gimmicks. But one of the Sanity enhancements that we added to the shopping experience was separating out these sizes, so that we can actually select, because the shoes are actually unisex. So the 7.5 in women's actually translates to a 6 in men's. But if I go 9.5 and then I go Euro, that's actually a 43. And this was like, from the client perspective, a requirement essentially. And from my Shopify technical experience, that requirement was something that wasn't even possible in the platform. So in Sanity and our like variant level, we actually have this variant title is what's coming from Shopify. And then we have 4 fields that let us associate the correct variant size based on the selection previously. And that's really where like, that was the only customization I added to this like shopping experience. The rest is just like pulling in images from Sanity, like adding input for history and info, like nothing too crazy, nothing like super overly module like the Prima experience. I think it's just in here. So I have like a description and like a size guide and history. Like it's not even like flexible the same way that the Prima experience is, but it's still allowed for a much higher editing experience for the client. So like they have their baseline of products, and now moving forward, they'll probably be focusing more on like their editorial content. So we've built them a platform that takes in those product e-com requirements, but sets them up for furthering their success with a more elevated editorial and other experiences, because product isn't necessarily going to be like the core crux of this experience. It'll be telling people stories and getting people like involved in the brand in that way.
Is it like, so you have like science here. I guess it's now purely digital. Do they have also plans to like actually print them?
I don't know. I feel like zine was just a better name than a blog. You know, you can't be a cool internet experience if you call yourself a blog. You know, it's got to be.
Now you have to buy a Reso press printer thing and push them out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, if they made zines, they could also sell them on the site. So it could be cool.
And then you can make like a PDF render or something. I'm just throwing in ideas.
Yeah. I will say there was, so this is like actually a really simple version, but this like font change here is actually something that, of course, you know, we elevated with the editor. So for example, I added this like new font selection so that they could select serif instead of the like default rendering of the font. I've also done that like here on occasion too. And using the serializer, we can render the type in any way that we want. And that's just something that if we did this in a traditional Shopify blog, they would have to go into the HTML editor in order to accomplish even a simple like font change. So really trying to like elevate those editing experiences in really simple ways, instead of forcing clients to learn HTML and hope that they close their tags correctly. Sounds much scarier in my opinion. So.
And what's interesting is that next year, when serif is totally out and you need Gothic, you can actually just migrate that quite easily.
Yeah.
For the script and replace the serif tag with Gothic, and there we have it.
Yeah. I mean, the serializer is just like one file that takes all the content. So it'll be, if they wanted to switch that font, I could do it in like 10 seconds, realistically, instead of them going into Shopify, into the HTML editor and updating it across the whole system. So those are some of those like wins that they don't know they have yet.
I don't know if you can, but could you show us like how the like interaction between Shopify and Sanity looks like the syncing stuff? I know if it's production data, I know that may be difficult to do like on the spot, but
so like this is actually like, this one is a little bit more elevated than the Prima one because of the control we needed at the variant level. So I have products, which just like store all the top level data. That's syncing into or from Shopify into here. and then the variants are split out and associated to the products as a reference so that we could add these additional meta information to them. And then you can see that here in the, is it in the product? Yeah, so like these are the variants that are linked from here. And then I can show you, let's go to share my, stop sharing this 1 second. And this is all just a like Netlify Lambda function that does all of this syncing. So.
Oh, we have a new guest.
Ooh, doggy.
Yeah, we are really big with the K9 developers.
He helps out in the office.
We have
Keeps tensions a little softer.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, is this big enough, do you think, or?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think I've like shared this a bit too in the past, but this is just an endpoint that lives in my Netlify instance, and I set up a webhook that points to my like website /function /Shopify, and it accepts product update and create. And then from there, I'm hitting the product type endpoint that's set up in Sanity and creating a transaction, creating it if it doesn't exist, patching the data if it already does. And then after doing that, we do this like nested variant, which also talks to a type inside of the Sanity box. And after that, it pushes that data back into the product with a reference, which is happening down here. And that just like closes the loop so that all of the variants are like associated to the correct products in both Sanity and in Shopify. And aside from that, like I've actually been asked a number of times by other developers about the approach that I take for these things. This is the only information that I'm ever syncing back to Sanity. I don't sync things like pages, the collections, or any of that information. I recreate those experiences inside of Sanity. And that just like gives me more control and flexibility. And I don't want there to be some type of like Shopify changing data structure that's causing breaking changes. I'd like to pull as little from Shopify into my system as possible. So, yeah.
Is this kind of similar to your approach as well, Joseph?
Yeah, it's really similar. I am syncing collections as well, but other than that, I'm like trying to keep it as minimal as possible. And I haven't been I've been planning a way to deal with variants. I haven't set that up yet. So this is interesting. I want to catch up with you more about this later.
Happy to share.
Yeah, perhaps you could share it within a kind of a gist or something that we could link to in the YouTube description. Yeah, cool. And it's not a bunch of code.
No, this handles all of the syncing between the two systems. It's pretty light. In fact, most of the errors were written by Ian, another developer. That guy. He didn't like that I didn't have a bunch of like catch error handling for some reason.
Who cares about errors?
Yeah, you write it perfect and then there's no errors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you have used TypeScript, Kevin, then everything would be like pristine.
So I'm building I'm building another Sanity Shopify experience right now, and it is all Gatsby TypeScript, which has been a experience. I actually quite like it. It took some getting used to for sure, but knowing having your components like yell at you from like every direction about missing data or like data structure not being appropriate, I think is super beneficial in the long run. I'm thinking about like how I kind of want to refactor some of my old Gatsby sites into TypeScript, but I know that's a very long, unrealistic thing to do for clients that are past tense legacy. But we'll see if 2020 will allow me to refactor some of these code bases, because I would like to TypeScript some of these things, because I think it further elevates the experience and organization and structure and all that good stuff. So
yeah, 2020 will be the year I actually dive into TypeScript for real and not just for pretend.
Yeah. And one thing too that I've been doing is I'm using the Sanity GraphQL API. And from that, you can generate types. And that's been super helpful on the front end.
How do you feel about that, Kevin? I mean, you know my opinion on GraphQL is very anti.
Interesting.
I think I have 6 Gatsby Sanity sites at this point, and they're all just Grok. I use create page and or a like custom source plugin that just like acts like the Gatsby source plugin, but it only does like nested Grok querying. I enjoy the syntax of it, honestly, a lot more than GraphQL, and think a lot of the nested data structure stuff that I've heard is fixed in terms of breaking changes for super modular sites, but I've been burnt like 3 times on Gatsby builds that towards production time, missing things in GraphQL schemas, crashing my websites wasn't something that I was like in the mood for. So and like the level of effort to migrate off of it is also so light. I switched out a site that was basically going live to custom like just Grok queries in like a day or two, and got like all of the GraphQL stuff out of there. And it also like reduced a lot of complexity in my templating, because the nested data structure of GraphQL, I'm also just not a very big fan of. I'm not sure what the Sanity GraphQL looks like, because I just haven't used it. So I can't like really knock it that hard. I'm sure it's great. It's the like, all of my like Shopify auth, for example, is GraphQL, because the storefront API is GraphQL, and seeing like user.customer.user.error.error.customer error is like the worst thing in the entire world. And you have to like check if it exists too. So you have to like super nest like all of the like handling of that. So
Pray for the nullish coalition operator thingy that comes any moment. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's super interesting. And now we actually, now we have like Grok.js. You could actually do the same thing that the source plugin for like GraphQL does, where you actually stream your whole data set in one go into memory. And then you could just query it in the Gatsby build with Grok locally. That's possible now, which would save you a lot of queries. Like it's just one request to build your site.
Really, we need to talk more about that.
Yeah. So the missing fields thing with Gatsby and GraphQL, that's sort of the first problem that we try to solve with the source plugin. So So what it actually does is to fetch the GraphQL schema from Sanity, and that's the only thing it does with the GraphQL thing, to know what fields you have in your data model, to prevent that they suddenly disappear if the content disappears.
Yeah.
So it won't happen with our source plugin. Knock on wood. That's like the goal. But
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the flexibility of Gatsby, and yeah, we are like supporting both. We like Grok, we like GraphQL, and we are now doing a iteration of on the GraphQL API. So we hope that will be good for people to have. So yeah, perhaps next year we have a big showdown. and just one of them needs to win. Like, who's the Betamax and who is the VHS? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think we are closing to an hour now. I don't know how much Shopify and e-commerce talk people can bear. I could be here an hour more, but it seems like a good spot to wind down. Yeah, it's too bad we didn't actually get to see more of your stuff, Joseph. But we can do this again, right?
Yeah. The timeline for the projects I'm working on right now is kind of like end of January launch. So hopefully I'll have a fully functional, sane Shopify setup. Then I'll figure out my screen sharing by then too. So
I will actually I will share
sure.
the screen with the sane Shopify package so that people could check that out. Let me see if I actually managed to do it.
I can Slack you a link really quick.
I have it.
Oh, okay, cool.
I have awesome Google skills. I'm a developer advocate. Right. I just need to. So here's the repository.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use it in production.
Yeah.
But you're totally going to use it in production. Yeah. So you have some components here. You have like the Sanity plugin and a server and some sync utilities, and you have the types for the Typescripters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that looks quite nice.
And one thing I want to point out too, for people who are listening now and interested, if you scroll up to the top of the README, under that curious header, leave a comment in this issue. That's kind of, I just opened an issue as a kind of unofficial mailing list sort of thing for people who want to get updates on when this thing actually is put together. So just anyone who's interested, leave a comment in there and
cool.
I'll ping you when it's ready.
It seems that people have already signed up.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And I've already started it. So
oh, great. Oh, it's got some good stars. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. So I hope people check this out. Looks super interesting. Yeah. And any final, like, do we have a moral of the story? Final advice.
Don't be afraid of the headless.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are like, as you were saying, like, how do you convince clients and get them excited? And it's probably less about that and just being comfortable building these platforms. If you're only a Shopify developer and only know how to use Liquid, maybe don't do it. But if you're building things and want to elevate whatever your client experiences are, it's definitely an option. It's definitely viable. It's definitely making the internet better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's one thing I was thinking about just as we were talking earlier is that with Sanity, things are so customizable, and I've been able to answer so many of my clients like weird requests with like, yeah, we can figure out a way to do that. Along with that, like customization does, like you're always going to be doing more work, but it's always a good payoff.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yes. So thank you so much for like doing this. I learned a lot. I had some fun. We had some ferns and a dog.
Yeah.
Everything is good. Yeah. So I hope you like get some rest into the holidays, and yeah, people can actually meet you in the Slack community. Like if you go to
Yeah.
slack.sanity.io, we are all there. So, and if people are interested in e-commerce, there's even a channel for e-commerce. So yeah, that's cool. Great. Again, thanks, and I see you in cyberspace somewhere.
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. And cue outro music if you have it.
guys.
I don't know. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Again, thanks. That was awesome.